What is up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to give you guys a list of things that you can photograph to help train your photographic perspective and to help subvert your viewers' expectations. The idea behind this video is similar to drawing prompts, I suppose, except for photography, but these aren't going to be your everyday photography prompts. These are going to be prompts that help you look at the world in a different way and really push yourself to find the unexpected in the otherwise mundane objects and details that you pass by in your daily life. I heard a great quote one time, and I cannot remember it word for word, but it was something along the lines of, a photographer is able to find the extraordinary in the commonplace. And that is exactly what these photography prompts are designed to help you develop the ability to do. First, I want to talk a little bit about the photographer's mindset. Now, this is sort of a perspective on the world that you develop when you are out shooting, especially when you're out shooting alone, just trying to look around the world for details, interesting things on the street that you're passing by that catch your eye, but not just your eye because they're interesting, that catch your eye because you as a photographer see an image there that might not otherwise be visible to somebody who doesn't practice photography. So it's this kind of almost like elevated state of awareness that you can get into when you're in that photography zone that really makes you look at things as lines and shapes and colors and forms rather than as just objects populating your world. So when you're practicing seeing the world this way, it can be really helpful to have specific goals. And that has been kind of my way of training my photographic eye, photographic perspective. I will set a goal for myself, like today I'm gonna go out and photograph 3 construction sites, or I'm gonna go out and photograph 6 outfits on passersby that I find interesting. Now I have to look at construction sites, right? I have to look at passersby. It's forcing you to not only notice them when they're there, but actively look for them. And the more you practice doing that in intentional ways through these challenges, the more you'll find yourself passively doing that even when you don't have your camera on you. Which honestly is kind of the worst, because like seeing something that's awesome and that I really want to photograph and I don't have my camera on me is just like... So I just gave you a little bit of a spoiler because both outfits and construction sites are on this list, but I'm gonna go over why those are important in a little bit. But first I just want to talk about what it means to subvert your viewers' expectations. So as you can imagine, viewers are used to seeing things like construction sites in a certain way. So you see them as like kind of big dirty pits with people at work, and that's pretty much all they are, right? So you as a photographer capturing that in a way that is interesting and fascinating and kind of shows off the detail or the bustle, you as a photographer can really subvert your viewers' expectations of what a construction site is. Not just what it looks like, but what space it occupies as a concept in their mind. Beginner photographers tend to fall into these pits of photographing things that are already noticeable, you know, taking pictures of flowers or people's pets or birds or squirrels. These are things that people already naturally look at and they already naturally capture our attention. So you can create beautiful photographs of them, and that's not what I'm saying at all, but if you're looking to challenge your viewer and create art that is unexpected and bring something new to the table, then photographing these things might not necessarily be the best choice, because you don't need to show me a photograph of it for me to want to look at it, you know? I'm already looking at this bird. I don't then need to see the photograph because I already took the time as a viewer to really look at it, right? Whereas something, again, like construction sites, I am not gonna take the time to really look at that. I'm not even gonna bother glancing at it sometimes. Maybe I'll glance at it if there's a loud noise, and that's about it. So you as the photographer have an opportunity there to force your viewer to really look at this thing that they otherwise would have completely ignored. Okay, so without further ado, I'm gonna get into the list. And number 1 is, you guessed it, construction sites. So the reason why I like photographing construction sites, you know, I already explained that yes, it subverts the viewer's expectations, it shows off something that wouldn't otherwise capture their attention, that they wouldn't otherwise be really looking at. But also, a construction site is a transitional space, a transitional time, a transitional place. It's something that's not gonna exist forever, and that isn't intentionally designed to look the way it does in the moment when it's photographed. So photographing completed buildings, an architect has designed those buildings. There's hundreds of hours that have gone into completing that design, and then thousands of hours that have gone into building that building. And so the final product is very much a result, and it's gonna look that way until it's torn down. So you're gonna be able to get a picture of that finished building for decades, maybe centuries. But the construction site is transitional. You're only gonna be able to get that picture for a couple of months. And every time you go back to that construction site, it's gonna look a little bit different because progress has been made on it, right? So I find that completely fascinating, that you can visit a spot and it will look one way, and then a week later you can visit it again and it will look completely different. And neither of them will be intentional, neither of them will be designed. That just is how it happens to look at that moment when you visit it. And so you have an opportunity there to capture something really special and something that no other photographer might have captured. So for example, you capture a building. This is one of my favorites. The new art gallery building downtown. I believe it's the new art gallery building. I don't know, it's just what somebody told me, but it looks like it could be. It's a really cool building. I visited that in the snow. So that building is probably, it only snowed once this year. So that building is probably only going to be under construction in the snow for one day, ever. Another example is a building by my place that is completely tarped over, and it's cherry blossom season. So that building may never be completely tarped over with scaffolding during cherry blossom season again. So getting a picture that includes both the building with the tarps and the cherry blossoms, that's a one-of-a-kind image. That's something that's never gonna be replicated. And I've tried talking to a few people about this and been like, isn't it fascinating? And they're like, well, what? You just want to capture a unique picture. You just want to be not like the other photographers, right? And I suppose that is part of it, but it's also kind of the thrill of documenting something that wouldn't otherwise be documented, It's not just that I have captured this picture, but it's having a record of something that I will never be able to go back and look at again, right? It's being able to see something that will never exist again. That's pretty cool. I don't know. I find that really cool and really fascinating. So that's definitely why construction sites is number one on this list. Number two is a really fun one for completely different reasons, and that is photograph your own shadow. So as the sun is setting behind you, you get all these shadows going forward, you turn around and your own shadow, may be interrupting the frame. And I was frustrated by this a couple times. I was out and about trying to photograph lines and shadows during the sunset and noticing that my shadow was just in every single one, right? So you could shop it out, I guess, or you could allow it to color and shape that image, which I think is actually a lot more interesting. So having your shadow in the photo allows the viewer to see that there is a photographer that's taking this shot. And I feel like a lot of photos, when we see them, especially the ones that just kind of bombard us in daily life, we really tend to forget that they are someone's art and that somebody has taken the time to go out and take these photos. To us, they're just images. There's just this wall of images. So having that shadow in there is kind of a reminder to your viewer that you as a photographer existed in this scene at this time to capture this image. And it actually shows the viewer what it looked like, or at least a foil of what it looked like having you in that space, in that time, capturing that image. I think that's really fascinating. It's subverting your viewer's expectations because it's interrupting the photograph with a relic that you have this inclination to shop out, to take out, because you're not used to having the photograph interrupted by the photographer. I don't know. I think it's an interesting thing to take pictures of. And there's also a lot of fun that you can have kind of playing with the shape of your shadow. So the clothes that you wear can impact the shape of your shadow, the hat that you wear, the way that you hold your camera, the position that you're in. There's a lot of ways that you as the photographer can alter the image, even when you are by yourself taking pictures of like an alley or something. Number three is one that you can do while you're on this shadow walk. You can take photos of houses in your neighborhood. So the reason why I think this one is really interesting is because you're used to seeing these. You, as the person who lives in this neighborhood, you're used to seeing these houses, right? And taking photos of them deliberately is then challenging your perspective. So it's challenging your view of the world, your view of these things as things that you pass by every day, and forcing you to really look at them, see which ones are actually interesting from a photographic perspective, and take the time to capture them in an artistic and creative way. And I really recommend that you do this in your own neighborhood, because these are houses that you yourself are used to seeing when you go out for walks, when you walk on the bus, whatever. You pass them all the time, and so it's challenging you as an individual to figure out the best way to photograph these things that have become commonplace to you. I find this one really interesting to do personally because I'm nosy and it's always fun to look in people's windows, but also you see things that you really don't expect, right? You look up into a window and maybe see like a rent freeze sign, or a collection of tiny objects on shelves, or a grow light with a ton of plants under it. And you just get this little look into people's lives. You know, maybe these photos, for the sake of people's privacy, maybe don't share them, or if you do share them, make sure that the house number is like not visible or like shopped out or whatever. But this is just for you as an exercise for you personally to train your photographic perspective. The reason why photographing houses helps to subvert your viewers' expectations is because they see houses on a block and they're 100% used to it, and they never really stop to take an extra look unless there's something, you know, really, really outstanding about them. If it's just like a regular like green house, people probably aren't going to take the time to even notice the rent freeze sign in the window, right? So you as a photographer are forcing them to look, to see this person's expression of themselves on the outside of their bedroom window. Have a look at this, notice it. I think that's really interesting. Number 4 is unusual shadows. So we already talked about capturing your shadow, but another kind of way to look at the world is just by looking at shadows, not looking at the thing that's casting the shadow, but just looking on the ground. So I find that the best time to do this is, 2 hours before sunset, you get out there and the shadows are like, the sun's not super low, so it's not like casting all shadows, but it's like just low enough that interesting things tend to have a little bit of shadow to them. Looking on the ground really helps you to see the world in kind of an abstract way, if that makes sense. Like, it reminds me of, I can't remember what children's book it was, but it was a children's book where the kid's seeing like scary monster on the wall, and then the dad comes in and turns on the light and it's just like a pile of clothes. If you're not looking at shadows, you might never have seen that scary monster on the wall, even though that would have been a really cool photograph, right? If you're looking at just the pile of clothes, you're only ever gonna see the pile of clothes. And so you gotta train yourself to look for those monsters on the wall. And I feel like that's what, dedicating yourself to only taking pictures of shadows for this photography session, I feel like that's really gonna help you learn. Number 6 is people's outfits as they pass by on the street. Now this one challenges not only your photographic perspective and your photographic eye, but also your confidence. And this has been a real challenge for me, and I don't have problems talking to people and asking them to photograph, but for some reason, like the first time, like you go out for a session and the first person you approach is like so hard, at least for me. And then after that, I have no problem with it. But the first person, I was always like, okay, I'm walking around the block a couple times, like following this person in a purple coat, like, I may ask her, I will ask her for a photograph. I might ask her for a photograph. So I recommend going downtown or to an otherwise populated area, and when you see a person with a really cool outfit walk by, just go up to them and be like, hey, I'm a photographer and I was wondering if I could take your picture. So what this does for you is A, improves your confidence. It also kind of trains your eye to be looking at people, which I don't know if this is true of everybody, might not be, but I tend to avoid looking at people. Like when I'm not in photography mode, I am looking straight forward. I tend not even to notice what people look like as they pass by me on the street because I am so deliberately not looking at them. Because I hate it when people stare at me. Like, I just don't like it. It's just rude, and I never want to be that person. So I barely ever make eye contact with people. So this is gonna help break you out of that. If you are like me and you have that where you're just kind of like tunnel vision on the street, help break you out of that and force you to really look at the people around you and really find interesting details in the way that they present themselves to the world. As a side note, I always feel so like joyful and happy after a street photography session where I'm asking people if I can photograph them, because people feel happy to get their photos taken. It's flattering. If somebody comes up to you and is like, whoa, your outfit's so cool, can I photograph it? Like, I would be flattered, and most of the people who I've talked to, you have been flattered and been like, oh, sure. And, I've never really had anybody be rude to me. I've had some people say no, which is fine, but nobody's ever been like, F off or something. And the reason why this challenge is gonna subvert your viewers' expectations is because they, just like you, are used to seeing people as just colorful objects that kind of populate the world around and don't necessarily have an individual presence in their lives, at least not until you get to talk to this person. But when you photograph this person deliberately, you single them out in the frame, you are highlighting them as something worth photographing. And so your viewer is then being forced to take in this person and see them also as something interesting, even though that viewer would otherwise have completely passed them by and might not have even looked at them. Because you photographed them, now they are giving that person a second glance and taking the time to really look. And I think that's really interesting, and it's also really good for kind of bringing people together and like instilling empathy and just kind of like teaching people to see other people as people and not just as dynamic objects. Okay, well that is my entire list. I hope that you found this video interesting. I know that I find it very interesting to photograph these things, and you know, the results aren't always like postable or like shareable, but they're always really fascinating, and I always really enjoy sorting them, editing them, because it feels like a bit of a treasure hunt sometimes. Like you're looking at the mundane and you're trying to find the fascinating, and like, yeah, it's a treasure hunt. It's like this really, and then when you do find the fascinating, it's like this thrill, right? Like this, oh my God, there it is. Like I'm gonna capture that, and maybe no one else would ever have seen this scene this way if I didn't take these hours to go out and look and really look. So I find it really fascinating, as you can maybe tell, and I hope you do too. And if you're a beginner photographer, I would really encourage you to go out and do as many of these challenges as you are able to or as you see fit. I think they would really, really help train you to see the world as more than just a collection of objects. I think they'll really train you to see the world as this fascinating, lively, and dynamic place where everything is changing and different, and you know, really subvert your own expectations of what you're going to see when you're out photographing, and your viewers' expectations of what these objects really look like, of what these things, what the world around them can look like. I don't know. I think it's super fascinating, and I would really encourage you to go do it. But in the meantime, thank you guys so much for watching. If you like this video, you could just like this video. You could give me a like down there. You could also subscribe to my channel if you want more content like this. If you found this fascinating, let me know in the comments section if you'd like to see more videos like this, or if you've got topics for future videos that you'd like to recommend. Or if you try any of these, I'd really be interested to see your results. So maybe post a link to those down in the comment section, or just let me know. And in the meantime, stay sharp and don't forget to keep shooting. Bye guys.